Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure this microphone is working.
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Salisbury. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll do the same check. Are you guys able to hear me also? This is John Arascata.
We are, John. I'm glad you're able to make it this morning by video. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a journey.
We're learning so much right now about technology.
Yes, indeed.
Didn't open as a ghost or yeah, that one's.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting of the Sentencing Commission to order. As you know, it's another virtual meeting of the commission, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending this morning and making the many adjustments that are required to participate in this type of meeting, especially with this size of group. A couple of reminders. Please remember to state your name each time you speak. This is important not only for us to be able to identify who is wanting to weigh in on a subject or participate, but also for the public to be able to know who's speaking, since their participation in this meeting is through live streaming. It also helps with respect to Victoria's attempt to collect the minutes of the meeting. I also wanted to mention that our staff is monitoring the quality of the streaming of the meeting. If they identify a problem during the course of the meeting, they'll let us know by text message, and I'll be pausing the meeting until we can get that issue resolved. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, and we appreciate everybody's patience and assistance during the meeting and those times when we have to interrupt to address IT issues if they come up. I'd like to begin by having a roll call. So if you could identify yourself when you respond, or I'll call your name and just identify your presence. Go ahead. You go ahead.
All right. And then please remember to unmute so we can make sure I hear you. Mr. Arascata?
Present.
Chief Carpenter?
I'm here. Good morning.
Director Daniel?
Unmuted.
Just unmute.
Oh. Here.
Go ahead. I'm here. Director Daniel.
Chairman Dorico?
Here.
Judge Freeman?
I'm present.
Mr. Hicks?
Present.
Mr. Imlay? Ms. Jones-Brady?
Present.
Sheriff Logan?
Present, please. Good morning.
Morning. Mr. Marsh?
Here.
Mr. McCormick,
Here.
Ms. Mull. I see her. Dr. Neighbors, Mr. Ponder,
Good morning, present.
Dr. Salisbury,
Present.
Mr. Story,
Present.
Dr. Tyler Garner, Judge Villani, Assemblyman Hambrick, Assemblyman Wynn, Senator Cannizzaro, Senator Pickard, Vice Chair Callaway,
Here.
Chair Hardesty.
Present.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, I'd like to circle back. We went through a few of these names quickly, and sometimes people are trying to unmute and respond. Ms. Mull, we see you, but I don't know that you can hear us. Can you hear us, Ms. Mull?
Looks frozen.
Yeah. Ms. Mull, I don't know if we have an email or a
Yeah, I'll
text
just send a
message.
message.
Maybe Squick could do that. I know that Ms. Neighbors was going to be late. I'd like to ask again, is Dr. Tyler Garner with us today? Judge Villani? Assemblywoman Nguyen? Senator Cannizzaro? Senator Pickard? Okay. If they join the meeting, they may be a little bit late. Of course, we'll mark them as present when they join. As we have before, we'll begin with public comment. Just as a reminder, there are two periods of public comment for this meeting, one at the beginning of the meeting and again at the end of our discussions. And I'll open the agenda item for the first public comment period. As we have discussed in our meeting on April 13th, on March 22nd, the governor issued Emergency Directive 006 in response to the COVID crisis. This emergency directive suspended certain requirements of the open meeting law. The manner in which the public comment was handled at the meeting on April 13th and will be handled today is the result of staff working with the Attorney General's office to ensure that this public body is in compliance with the open meeting law and that emergency directive by the governor. Staff has emailed you public comment that we had received as of last night. That is, it's been emailed to each of the commission members, and that was through last evening. I'm going to change things up a bit so that we can hopefully improve our communications and the public's knowledge of what we're doing with respect to public comment. I'm not sure that things went as well as I'd like to have had them go on the meeting of the 13th, so we'll keep trying at this. First of all, for the public comment that we received through last evening, Executive Director Gonzalez has prepared a written summary or statement of who provided the public comment so that the public is aware. She's going to put it on the screen, and that way the public will be aware of who we have received public comment from. I'm then going to ask each commissioner if they have read the public comment. I'll lay that out as a group. And if anybody needs more time to complete reviewing that public comment, let me know. We've also received, and that covers public comment 1 through 11. We also have public comment 12 through 16 that we received last night and again this morning. And I believe that the secretary for the commission has distributed this by email to all of the commissioners just minutes before the meeting began. So you'll need to consult your email to go over public comment 12 through 16, and I'll announce those as well. I am informed by Executive Director Gonzalez that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of another perhaps 60 or so public comment that has come in, but we have not even had a chance to open it. And Ms. Glick with the commission is currently collecting the balance of those statements, and we will present those at the end of the meeting, at that portion of the meeting dealing with public comment. So I would request each of the commissioners to advise me if they need more time to review public comment 1 through 11, and I'll ask Ms. Gonzalez to put on the screen the names of the persons who submitted public comment 1 through 11. I also noticed that Dr. Neighbors has joined us. Is that right, Doctor?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being with us. And I also noticed that Assemblywoman Nguyen has joined us. Is that right, Rochelle?
Yes, hopefully hear me.
Welcome. Thank you. And has Senator Canizaro joined us, or Senator Pickard? Okay, not yet.
Yes, I see in the chat. I don't know who uses chapter leans, and Mr. Lay is having audio problems, but he is there, as it says in the chat.
I'm sorry, Assemblywoman Nguyen, what you just said was really garbled. Could you try again?
Your garb as well. Mr. Millett appeared to be as well. To reach chat, it's like he has a problem as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So would any commissioner who needs additional time to review public comment 1 through 11, please let me know.
I need additional time. I'm looking for the 1 through 11. I have the 12 through 16. This is Christine Jones Brady.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Dr. Neighbors. I'm having a similar problem finding them. I've got the 12 through 16, but I'm not finding the 1 through 11.
Okay. Director Gonzalez is going to resend 1 through 11.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as a reminder, that 1 through 11 email went out last night in case you had another volume of emails, but I'm going to try and send it out again.
Okay, I'll look further down my string here. Yeah.
Okay, I just resent the public comment 1 through 11 to the commission, so I apologize to those who already had it, but just in case.
And then if you could, Victoria, place the sign
Yes.
up as to, we're now going to place the sign up in front of the screen that shows the names of the persons who submitted public comment 1 through 11. If the commission members would please check your records and your copies of the comment with the list that Ms. Gonzalez is showing you and the public.
Hi, this is Darren Emily. I'm joining from my phone. I wasn't able to get the audio going on my computer.
Okay. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Darren, we are reviewing the public comment 1 through 11. Do you have that public comment?
I do, and I've been able to hear the entire meeting so far. I'm not able to speak. So I have the public comments, so I've been able to review those.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Hardesty, it's Todd Story with the ACLU. The list that Victoria is holding up only has comments 1 through 10. What we were distributed has 11 comments.
Thank you. 11 was on the next page, and then I have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's your list to go through 16. Just to repeat for those who are observing this meeting through live streaming, the commission members are currently reviewing or have reviewed and are looking at another section of public comment. We have in front of us public comment 1 through 11. And in addition, have now added public comment 12 through 16. Each of the commissioners have received all of the public comment now, is my understanding, and they are in the process of reviewing all of the public comment, including 12 through 16. I'm going to canvass the commission in a moment, but they need more time to review some of this public comment. Just for the record, as we have displayed, public comment 1 through 11. Number 1 was received from Jocelyn Lee. Number 2 was received from Jocelyn Lee, or excuse me, from Karen Wolf. From Karen Wolf, forwarding a letter regarding Karen and Chuck Schaefer. A third public comment from Ms. Lee. A fourth public comment was received from Priscilla Vogel. A fifth public comment was received from Lorena Navarro. A seventh public comment from Nicole Brown. The sixth public comment, was from Aline Wolf, The eighth public comment is from Darren Scheidel. The ninth public comment is from Kate Berry, enclosing a letter from the Federal Public Defender's Office. And a 10th public comment is from Laura Martin. And the 11th public comment, let's see, I don't have that one. Who's that from, Victoria?
It's from Ernest Bailey.
Ernest Bailey, yes, thank you. And for the record, the 12th public comment is from Mercedes Maharis. I want to note that that public comment includes a link to a video from Kinsey Institute, Indiana University Media Online Collection. I won't play that, but I want to acknowledge that that is present within her comment, as well as a link to a Michigan news report. In the 13th public comment, it is a memo from David Figler. The 14th public comment comes from Christina Veldveld. And the 16th public comment comes from a concerned citizen of Nevada, unidentified. And as I mentioned earlier, the staff of the commission received numerous other public comment, but is just now trying to organize it to get it to the commissioners, and I'll defer circulating that public comment until when the second public comment section of the meeting, which will occur at the end of the meeting. once again, for those of you that are streaming, watching this or listening to this meeting, members of the commission are reviewing the 16 pieces of public comment that I've listed a moment ago. And as we have done in the previous meeting on April 13th, we'll do again with respect to this meeting within 2 working days of this meeting. Staff will post on the Nevada Sentencing website the public comment that was received at this meeting, both in this session and in the final session of public comment. I realize this is a bit cumbersome, but I'm going to canvass the commission members to see if anybody needs more time or if you've completed your review of the public comment. Mr. Arascata?
I do not need more time. I've reviewed all the material and public comment.
Chief Carpenter?
I don't need any more time. Thank you.
Director Daniels?
I don't need any more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman DeRico?
I have completed. Thank you.
Judge Freeman?
I don't need any more time. Thank you.
Mr. Hicks?
I've reviewed it all. Thank you.
Mr. Imlay?
I reviewed them all. Thank you.
Ms. Jones-Brady?
I've reviewed them all. Thank you.
Sheriff Logan?
I have reviewed them all. Thank you.
Mr. Marsh?
I've reviewed the materials. Thank you.
Mr. McCormick?
I've reviewed the comments. Thanks.
Mr. Mull? Excuse me, Miss Mull. I'm sorry.
I've reviewed them all. Thank you.
Dr. Neighbors?
Yes, I've reviewed them all. Thank you.
Mr. Ponder?
Reviewed. Thank you.
Dr. Salisbury?
Thanks. I've had sufficient time.
Mr. Story?
I've reviewed them all, yes, thank you.
Has Dr. Tyler Garner been able to join us? Has Judge Villani been able to join us? Assemblyman Nguyen?
I don't need any further time. Am I still garbled?
No, it came through pretty good that time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Senator Cannizzaro, have you been able to join us? Senator Pickard, have you been able to join us? Vice Chair Callaway?
I'm all good, thanks.
And I have reviewed all of the public comment as well. As I mentioned, then this concludes the first public comment session. We will circulate to the commission members and publish a list of public comment that our staff is currently assembling for the public comment session at the end of the meeting. I would add, for those members of the public that are watching the meeting, you can submit public comment during the meeting, and it too will be added to the list and to the public comment that's being assembled by our staff. And that public comment will be circulated to the commission as well at the end of the meeting. So I'd like to move on and open agenda item number 3, approval of the February 19th minutes. Are there any edits, comments, or corrections to the February 19th minutes? May I have a motion?
This is John Arascata, so moved to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Arascata. Is there a second?
John McCormick, second.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. I won't do a roll call. Is there any discussion first before we call for the vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is there anyone who is opposed? Does anyone wish to abstain? All right, then those minutes are approved. Thank you. As you know from the agenda and the materials you've received, we have a rather lengthy set of matters to consider today. I'll try to be a little bit more mindful of the need to take some interim breaks, but those breaks will be short or we'll never get through all this material, but we'll take some breaks, a few more than we took on the April 13th session for people's convenience. I also wanted to mention for the public's knowledge, I should have mentioned this before, that the task of preparing these minutes is substantial. So I do not expect the draft of the April 13th minutes to be available or on our website for at least another couple of weeks. It is a huge undertaking. And with all of the work that the Sentencing Commission has been presented with, we still only have 2 staff members, Director Gonzalez and her administrative assistant, Ms. Glick. So this is a really demanding amount of work that we have laid on our staff. And I want to thank Ms. Gonzalez and Ms. Glick for their extraordinary work in assembling all of these materials and information for the Sentencing Commission members and to the best as we can for the public as well. As you'll recall from our meeting, let me open agenda item number 4 then. As you'll recall from our meeting in February, I have asked Director Gonzalez to provide a director's report at each of our commission meetings on the activities of the department. So Director Gonzalez, if you'd like to proceed, thank you very much for being ready and getting us going here.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad everyone was able to make it. If it's acceptable to the chair, what I would like to do is, you can see on the agenda that my report is broken up into 4 sections. And so if I could, I would take the summary of our activities and the budget portion sections first, and then answer any questions addressing those. And then after I present C and D individually, after each one of those, I'll take questions, because I think the questions will be specific to each of those sections, if that's acceptable. As the Commission may recall, the Department of Sentencing Policy was temporarily housed in the Governor's Finance Office until we could secure affordable and available office space. At our meeting back on February 19th, I informed the Commission that we secured space at 625 Fairview Drive in Suite 121. We moved into our office on March 9th in anticipation of receiving furniture and having services set up in that week and the following week. As we all know, the social distancing policy began around March 16th. And so that halted all of our efforts to get settled into our office. Even though we had physically moved into the office, we did not have furniture and we did not have all of our services. And so this resulted in either we have to wait for some things or a lengthy turnaround time for each of the services. So just, I'm letting the commission know this so you, because we appreciate everyone's patience and support as we're trying to get the work done that is not only in front of us because of AB 236, but because of the current situation as well. We recently had our phones installed last week, so we were very excited about that progress, and we just got a working printer this week. And so we still do not have furniture. Ms. Glick has donated some folding tables for us to use as our desks, and that is working just fine. And so we're enjoying the environment of feeling like a startup department. And we knew that we were going to be facing some challenges by starting a brand new department, but this existing crisis has created some new challenges that are exceptional. But we appreciate your patience as we work through these and keep you in constant communication. And I can't wait to see what progress we made when I see you again in July. As you know, the website for the department and the commission is up and running at sentencing.nv.gov. The website is where the meeting agenda and materials will be posted. Because the commission is no longer a legislative body, all of the materials and the agenda will be posted on our website now and no longer on the legislative website. However, we intend to put a link to the legislative website so that those who are looking at the genesis of the commission and want to be in touch and want to keep up to date with the materials and activities from the previous interim will have a direct link to that. We are looking forward to adding to that website more and providing more content and looking to really make sure that website can be another valuable criminal justice policy resource in the state. Next, I want to update the commission on the establishment of the Nevada Local Justice Reinvestment Coordinating Council. At our meeting on February 19th, the commission approved for me to take the steps necessary in order to establish this council. As you may recall, the council is comprised of a representative from each county in this state and 2 representatives from Clark County and Washoe County. In an effort to learn more about the counties, I met with the Nevada Association of Counties to coordinate efforts, not only to inform the counties, but also as a way to invite the counties to appoint their representatives to the council. The executive director of the Nevada Association of Counties was very gracious and supportive and recommended that I be put on an agenda for a board meeting where I could make a presentation and extend that invitation to the counties to appoint their representatives. I had planned to do that presentation at the meeting in April. Obviously, the situation has changed. They have not, the NACO has not been meeting, and as soon as they do, I will be making a presentation to the board and looking to get the council established. So I'm hoping again at the July meeting, I'll have some more information about the progress we've made in getting the council established. The last item I want to mention as far as the summary of our activities is I wanted to inform the commission regarding the amount of mail that we receive from incarcerated persons. To date, we have received 60 letters from across this state and from Arizona. As you know, NDOC is housing some inmates in Arizona. We have not had time to review all of the mail yet, but I can generally tell you that the letters include requests for individuals and their cases, but they also include broader legislative and policy requests and recommendations. While I realize neither the commission nor the department is an advocate for individuals, it is my intent to keep you informed that we are receiving this mail and consult with the commission on how you would like the department to handle this mail. This could involve acknowledging each letter by sending a specific or a general letter. We could discuss individual letters at a meeting, or we take some other action or response as the commission deems appropriate. However, my intent was not to address this issue today because we haven't had time to fully review all of the mail. But my intent is at our meeting in July to give you a more in-depth presentation about that mail and then start discussing possible actions you would like the department to take. Next, I will move on to the budget component of my report. Those of you who are associated with state agencies know that budget kickoff was held on February 27th. The kickoff initiates the budget building process for state agencies in the upcoming session. There are a variety of activities and deadlines that will keep us very busy for the next several months, along with establishing the department and carrying out the activities of the commission. I will have more information regarding budget building at the meeting in July. More importantly, I would like to address how the COVID-19 crisis is impacting the budget of the Department of Sentencing Policy. As you know, the state is in need of financial support and adjustments due to certain shutdowns in response to the crisis. Specifically, on March 17th, the governor instituted a hiring freeze and limited spending to essential purchases in state agencies. As the Commission may recall, the Department of Sentencing Policy was appropriated 4 staff, which includes an executive director, a staff attorney, an administrative assistant 4, and an administrative assistant 2. As of March 17th, the department had only filled 2 of those positions, mostly because we did not have proper office space. And our intent was, as soon as we moved into our office space, to begin recruitment for those other 2 positions. With the hiring freeze in place, we are no longer able to recruit or hire for those 2 other positions. Additionally, on April 3rd, the governor asked each department to make certain cuts to their budgets to begin the budget reserves process. Because the department had 2 vacant positions, those salary savings were used to contribute our designated portion of 4% to budget cuts for fiscal year 20. However, in order to meet the requirements to cut 14% from our budget in fiscal year 29, I had to make a decision about what to cut in order to meet that 14%. I made the difficult decision to leave the staff attorney position vacant until January 2021 in order to meet that 14% cut. I will keep the Commission updated if there are additional developments related to budget cuts. In the meantime, we will continue to work on building our budget for the upcoming biennium and look forward to bringing on our staff attorney around the time the upcoming legislative session begins. We will also begin recruitment for the Administrative Assistant 2 position as soon as the hiring freeze is lifted. The last thing I would like to note related to the budget of the department are the deadlines for BDRs. For the department, we have a non-budgetary BDR, which is often referred to as a policy BDR, which is due May 20th. And then we have a budgetary BDR, which is anything that will impact the budget of the Commission or the department, which is due September 1. I would like to have recommendations and approval from this Commission before submitting any BDRs. However, due to the crisis, the Commission has not been able to properly meet and vet any recommendation for the policy BDR or the non-budgetary BDR I recommended. I requested an extension of the May 20th deadline from GFO. As of this date, I have not received a denial or approval of this request. However, because we're a new department and the Commission is newly established in the executive branch, from the perspective of the department, do not see a pressing need for a policy BDR right now. I think as the department and the Commission get up and running at full strength, we would be in a better position to vet a recommendation for the 2023 legislative session. And then I plan to revisit this and the budgetary BDR in more detail at the July meeting as well. I know we're putting off a lot till then, but we have a lot to do today as well. So, however, I would be willing to proceed in whatever manner the Commission would prefer. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions about either the summary of that activities, the budgetary issues of the department, or anything else I've presented so far.
Do any commissioners have any questions for the director on her report up to this point? All right, seeing and hearing none.
I'm sorry. Justice Hardesty, John Ponder for the record. So the letters that have been received, you said the 6 years old that are coming from inmates, that there's going to be a follow-up meeting, follow-up to that to get addressed by the Commission in, was it June or July?
Yes, July. Right. Sorry, go ahead.
So at the July meeting, what I would like to suggest is that if we could send letters back to the inmates to just acknowledge that they've been received, and then let them know the next steps of it so that we won't be in limbo to get those questions answered in July.
It's a good suggestion, John, and we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just observe on the budget issue my deep concern about the Commission's ability to produce the statutorily mandated reports operating with just Executive Director Gonzalez and Ms. Glick, I think, and no attorney. I think it's important that we seek budgetary exceptions so that we can fill one of those positions at least. And I'm open to and would entertain a motion that the commission request that kind of budgetary relief through our director to the finance office and the governor. I feel like this department got caught in a timing problem, and frankly, given a month or so, we would have had the one of those other two positions filled. But I just think it's going to be impossible for the Sentencing Commission to fulfill its obligations statutorily with just two staff members. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I would urge the commission to think about that and entertain a motion that would have the commission request the governor's finance office and the governor to provide relief. And I don't know if there's going to be a special session or not, but perhaps that can also be addressed at that time as well if they're going to be taking up budget considerations. But at least for now, I'd like to get this exempted from this requirement.
Justice, this is Ann Carpenter. I just wanted to maybe make a suggestion before we did the motion. Would the commission be amenable to maybe looking at second and third year students from our law school down here to try to at least help or have an externship or something along those lines if we can't fill that?
We certainly have explored that and will continue to. And there is interest, my understanding, from law students to help provide that support. But my own view of the magnitude of the requirements of the report and the nature of the subject matters would make it challenging for an admitted lawyer, let alone a law student, to help. Doesn't mean they can't, for sure, and we would welcome that. And I think it'd be actually a wonderful opportunity for a law student or two to learn some issues surrounding the criminal justice system. So it's a great suggestion, and we are looking into that. Yes, ma'am.
Justice Hardesty, Todd Story with the ACLU. I would make a motion that we engage with the governor's finance office and seek an exception to the budgetary restrictions that are imposed on hiring, and see if we can't hire on at least one of these positions to fulfill the statutory requirements of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Is there a second?
Justice Hardesty, this is John McCormick. I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? So to be clear, I assume everybody's clear on the motion. We'll take a roll quickly. Perhaps we can do this without a roll. I'll give it a try. All those who are in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 Yes. Aye. Yes.
Is anyone opposed to the motion? Would anybody prefer to abstain on the motion? All right, it sounds like it's unanimous, and we'll record that action of the commission. Are there any other questions or comments from commission members up to this point of the director's report? All right, go ahead, Director.
Thank you. For the record, Victoria Gonzalez. So first, before I move on to the next item, I just want to make sure for those of you who would like to refer to agenda item 4C, which is NRS 176-01343, which is that comes from AB 236, and this is the mandate for the commission tracking and assessing outcomes related to certain data. I think we're going to be reviewing this NRS a lot, and so I think it's helpful to have a good handle on how to navigate it. So just real quickly, I'm going to point out that in subsection 1, it says the Sentencing Commission shall, and then if you look at paragraph A, and then on my copy, it's going to be the next page, and B, and paragraph C and D, those are the big data pieces we have to collect. So if you notice, paragraph A says that requires that we collect data from the Department of Corrections. Paragraph B applies to the division, which is parole and probation. Paragraph C is the tracking we had to do with respect to savings and reinvestment. And then paragraph D is the information that we will be collecting from the Records Communication and Compliance Division, just as a way to navigate that. And so you can see what it is we're relying on as we're using this as a guide to what data we can collect and what we can't. And so if you want to make connections between what I'm reporting on and what's in the statute, I put this here for your guidance. I'll start with Department of Corrections. So as an update, I want to update you on the Commission on the activities in regards to this data collection. Back on February 19th, we provided an update of what we had done so far. Working with the staff of CJI, we were taking this statute and meeting with each agency or department that we need to collect data from, and going over all of these data measures to determine what we can collect and what we can't, and then maybe figuring out how we're going to organize this for the Commission. So in terms of the Department of Corrections, we met, me and then myself and then the staff of CJI last met with DOC on February 25th. I will say overall we are very encouraged after this meeting. We met with them for several hours. I've met with them a couple times since then, and we are very encouraged by the amount of data we're going to be able to collect from them, which is most of it. If you notice throughout the statute, so if we look at paragraph A, or subsection 1, paragraph A, and then subparagraph 1, 2, 3, that breaks it down, and subparagraph 1 breaks it down to prison admissions. Subparagraph 2 is in terms of parole and release. Subparagraph 3 is the actual individual sitting in prison. And we're going to be able to meet a lot of these data measures here based on our meetings with NDOC. I'll point out that one of the things that's required in the statute is collecting measures related to race and ethnicity. At NDOC, that is collected as one element, which we will be noting when we're putting that together in the report. A big intent of ours as we meet with each of these agencies and departments is to meet them where they're at with their data and try and reconcile the statutory requirements with what they are already reporting, and then making adjustments where we can. We don't want to have to make too many adjustments either on their end or on the end of the department, because we want to make sure the data is reliable and can be credible. And the way we can do that is by using systems they already have in place instead of making demands on either the department or our department that we aren't really equipped to make. And so race and ethnicity is one of those where it's statutorily required. And so what we'll do is we will report it the way the NDOC collects it, and then clarify that it's collected together and not individually. Another one of those, another example of the data pieces that we're going to have to work with NDOC a little bit more on is the mental health, the number of persons who received a clinical assessment identified with a mental health disorder or substance use disorder upon intake. NDOC uses some information they gather intake for classifications within NDOC, and so we're going to use that in terms of reporting this data, but we're also going to continue to work with NDOC on developing methodologies that will help us drill down on how much of this data we can collect and make sure that we are collecting and reporting in a way that's consistent with what they are collecting and reporting, and still reliable and credible data. The next thing I wanted to mention is under releases, where it says that we need to collect information related to a risk score. Many currently incarcerated people will not have so that risk score is referred to as NRAS. They will not have a score because those inmates were incarcerated prior to the NRAS becoming used, and so those haven't been assessed yet. However, NDOC has a plan to work through the older admissions to make sure everyone has an NDOC score, and we'll be able to collect that data as needed. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we are in regular communication with NDOC. We plan to meet monthly. We plan to review the data that they have on a regular basis. And as we look at what they have, we'll look at if we're going to be comparing it to the statute and making sure what we're able to actually comply with. And based on those monthly meetings, we'll make adjustments as needed. And then the Department of Sentencing policy will then put something together and give it back to NDOC to make sure it's a proper representation. Because one of the things that we agree is that we want to make sure the data is telling the same story. And that there is one source of data, and there doesn't seem to be this misunderstanding as people take pieces of information and use it without the proper context. And so we want to work together with them to make sure that we're all on the same page with that and working together and not in opposition of each other. And so we're looking forward to that. And so I promise in July, or not promise, but I really look forward to July and what we're able to report about our progress. And as a reminder to the commission, our plan is to have all of these agencies submit data to the department by October 1 so that we can start putting that together and start working through preparing reports that we can have to the commission. So just so you know, the commission will see more data in late fall or early winter, but we're going to be working with the agencies and the departments to get that data to us by October 1 and looking at creating a baseline. So I'll keep you updated about that as well. I want to mention, we went into a lot of detail at the last meeting about our updates about the data we received from Pearl and probation. Our plan was to meet in person again because there's a lot of data we're not sure that we're actually going to be able to collect. And so we're trying to figure out what they can give us and where we're going to have to either make some adjustments or seek additional supports. We had planned to meet in person. Obviously, we haven't been able to do that yet, but we are still in contact by email. And as soon as we can, we're going to meet again and start looking at data in the way that we plan to look at it with NDOC, where we're generating reports and looking at doing some kind of trial reports to see what we're able to generate. Next, I'll give you an update on the Records Communication and Compliance Division and our meetings with them. As I mentioned in paragraph D, subparagraph D of paragraph A of subsection 1 is where those requirements are. Those are very consistent with the uniform, what they collect already for their report that they do in conjunction with the FBI. Again, we are very confident about most of the data we're going to be able to get from them. It's going to be very complete. The department will have to, will be responsible for some calculations. The staff of CGI is going to guide us on that so that we can have, again, reliability and credibility moving forward. And those calculations are not going to be significant. One of the things we want to make sure we share with the commission in terms of this data, and the division told us, is that from the division's perspective, whatever they give to us is complete data as they receive it from the counties. It's not uncommon from a county or other agency to neglect or fail to send data to the division. So we will, we'll do what we can to look for that when we're reviewing the data, but that's a highlight to point out that if we're looking at rates or looking at any sort of information we've collected, it's going to be limited to whoever actually reported that information. So there will be gaps in information, but that's based not on the division, but based on what the counties either were not able to send or failed to send. So at this point, and again, I'm in regular communication with that division as well. Again, the staff has been very supportive and collaborative. We keep in touch by email, and they have already sent some preliminary ideas. What if we sent the data to you like this? How does it look? And so we're communicating with them as well. And so again, we look to having a very positive collaboration interaction with these agencies and departments in trying to track and assess these outcomes as a result of the enactment of AB 236. So at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the data component portion of my report.
Yes, Sheriff Logan.
Good morning, Keith Logan for the record. Have you made notations that the uniform crime reporting to NIBRS is going to be switching in the interim of all of this for our report, because it is going to affect how those numbers and how your information that you can digest is going to be received? And it's kind of like changing the horse in the middle of the race.
For the record, Victoria Gonzalez, you are absolutely correct, Sheriff Logan. Yes, and that's what I appreciate being able to work with the division as well. They were able to not only give us a history, obviously, of where they've come in terms of data, and then where we're going with NIBRS. And NIBRS is going to be a very exciting next step, I think, for the data. It's going to look different as well, like you pointed out. And so I think in a way it's almost going to not quite be a different language, but it's something we're going to have to connect. And so we are going to be working with them as well to bridge that connection and provide all of that context and explanation in reports. Because one of the things we're going to be doing is we're taking these snapshots in time, but we've been evolving over time. And if we even go back to what ACAJ did back in the 2018 interim in regards to starting this activity and starting the collection of data, those collection practices have already kind of evolved and changed. And so as we get into the cost avoided component next, it's a similar situation where we're going to have to look back in time, which may have been with a different sort of methodology. We're going to look at the current time, which may be a different methodology, and then looking forward to another methodology possibly in the future. So yes, I appreciate your appreciation of that component. And when we get to that point, that'll be a great point of discussion for the commission to make sure that it makes sense to the commission what we put in the report in explaining all these different data components, because we want it to be able to make sense to the commission, to make sense to the public, and then to be able to actually support the policy recommendations of this commission. So yeah, our intent is to continue to talk to them, and as we present something, we'll take it to the commission and then go back to the division and make sure we're all on the same page. But yes, we are going to have to bridge that gap between where we are now and then moving into NIBRS.
Any additional questions from commission members on, I'm sorry, Sheriff, did you have a follow-up?
No, sir.
Any additional questions for Director Gonzalez on the data portion of her report? We'll hear a little bit more about that as we get into the agenda from CJI. Hearing no other questions in that area, let's go ahead, Director, with the next portion of your report.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so I'll direct your attention to the next agenda item we've included in your materials, which is agenda item 4D, NRS 176-01347. As Chair Hardesty mentioned, there are several reports and statements of updates that the Commission is responsible for submitting either to the Governor, to the legislature, and other entities within the state. This section of NRS includes one of them. I mentioned this briefly in our meeting last time. We're going to go into it just a little bit more depth here because some of these deadlines are coming on us. What I'm going to do is point out a couple of things first in the NRS section, but the focus of my presentation today is just going to be what's in subsection 3. To explain how we're going to approach that, because we're going to go in chronological order, but I want to point out what's coming for the Commission so that we can be prepared for that as well. And this is not the extent of our reporting requirements right now. This is just the most pressing, and we wanted to make sure we start talking about it now in preparation for the July meeting. So I'll point out in subsection 3, it says that not later than August 1 of each even-numbered year, the Commission shall prepare a report containing the projected amount of costs avoided. We are going to refer to this as the cost avoided report, and that's how we'll refer to it. We will, and I'll go into more detail about what that's actually going to include, but that's one of the things we have to worry about, or have to make sure we have to complete, and that the department will be assisting the Commission in working on, is the cost avoided report due August 1 of each even-numbered year. Then I will point out, if you move your way up to subsection 2, Subsection 2 says that on December 1st of each fiscal year, the Commission shall use a formula that is established from subsection 1 and calculate cost avoided. It's the way that I think about this is subsection 2 is we are comparing, let's see, we're just looking at, Subsection 2, Subsection 2 is comparing the projections from the ACAJ looked at in 2018 and the actual population. So what we're looking at are projections. So those of you that know, that are aware, NDOC uses projections from JFA to determine to build their budgets, among other things that they do with those projections. And we use those projections as well when ACAJ was working on the policy recommendations for AB 236. And so what this report is, and that will be due in December 1, it's a statement of the amount of costs avoided. We'll just be looking at what was the projections from 2018 and what is the actual population now. And so we will talk about that later. But just so you know, that's coming up, and that's a little more straightforward. And then we'll send that to the governor about just what did they look at in 2018 and where are we now actually. So I'll go back to subsection 3, which is the cost avoided report. So what this is generally is, I will say, it's a comparison of projections. We're going to be comparing projections from 2018 and the updated projections. I will get into more detail that in just a minute, but I just want to say from a high level, that's what we're doing. We're comparing projections because part of the rationale behind making the policy recommendations that enacted AB 236 were that we were on a trajectory that our prison population was going to increase at a certain rate. And so we're going to look at those rates that were those projections from 2018 and see how they relate to the projections now. Every year, JFA puts together projections for the prison population, and we're going to look at how are those projections changing over time. Again, we're not looking at the actual population, we're just looking at the projections. And what we're going to do is take the difference between the old projections and the new projections and then identify the difference of those and call those costs avoided, just from a high level. So I'm going to go back to this section real quick and then go into what our proposed methodology is, how to handle this costs avoided report of the projections. So if after we get that amount of the costs avoided, I just want to point out that in subsection 3, in paragraphs A, B, C, D, and E, the commission needs to put together a report that includes recommendations about what to do with these costs avoided. So we're comparing the projections. We've got this amount that we can say has been avoided because of the projections of the prisons and in the institutions, and then we take that amount and we put that into a report and we put recommendations based on these components. So you can see in paragraph A of subsection 3, that might mean making a recommendation for funding certain programs of reentry to DOC and DOC. It might mean in paragraph B, recommending funding for parole and probation. You can see, and then in C, D, and E, additional funding recommendations that the commission could take on. Paragraph C, we're going to hear about more when we hear the request for subawards from Post, because they have some mandates upon them because of AB 236. So the commission can recommend that these costs avoided be allocated to that program. The commission could recommend that these costs avoided be allocated to the housing division. Or in paragraph E, you could recommend that that the funds be recommended to the council, the coordinating council, which the commission is going to establish, because that council is tasked with issuing grants or approving grants out to local entities. And so just that will be what we're going to do in July. So what we want to talk about first is just specifically how we're going to handle the projections, which I gave you the high level, and I'll just go into detail with that one more time and then get some input from the commission. So step 1 for determining the projection of costs avoided is to establish a baseline. And so that baseline, as I mentioned, is going to be the projections the ACAJA used back in 2018. Step 2 will be to identify the new projections. So we'll be working with NDOC and coordinating when they receive those new projections from JFA, and then that will be the new projection. And we'll have to do this. And again, this report is done every August of each even numbered year. So each even numbered year, we'll take the projections from 2018, we'll compare it to the current projections that we are getting from NDOC, and then step 3, we will calculate projected avoided costs. So we will subtract the baselines from the new projections and then multiply the difference by a variable cost per prisoner. We have a variable cost from when the AB 236 policy projections were done, and we will work with NDOC to determine if that calculation needs to be updated. Just as a note to the commission, a variable cost is the cost of increasing or decreasing a prison population by one person. And this includes expenses such as food, clothing, and medical care. If you recall, the report that led to the enactment of AB 236 recommended that if certain actions were not taken, there'd be a certain cost to the state, and if certain actions were taken, there'd be a certain savings to the state. And so those savings were calculated using a similar variable cost as this one we're going to be using here. We want to continue to use similar methodologies as we try and determine what these costs avoided will be. And then, as I said, we will take the cost avoided, and then with the commission develop recommendations based on those 5 items I mentioned from the statute, and then the commission will decide based on the cost avoided, how would you like to recommend to the legislature and the governor about how to reinvest that money into other either programs or departments or divisions. I'm sorry I talked so fast. I just realized didn't take a breath. So I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission has about this, just a couple of these reports that are coming our way.
I've spent a fair amount of time with Director Gonzalez and with CJI representatives, and they've really done a great job conducting meetings with various agencies to help develop this strategy, and this outline, I think, is really helpful. Probably requires some additional explanation at some juncture, but I think it was intended to provide the commission with some direction, at least, as to what to anticipate in the next 4, 5, 6 months. Mm-hmm. And the report that has me particularly concerned is the one on August 1, when we're talking about staffing limitations. I trust that that's a very glaring example of the problem that we face. Okay, are there any questions of the director with respect to this portion of her report from commission members?
Justice RC Chuck Calloway here.
Hi, Chuck.
Director Gonzalez, I guess my question is maybe more of a philosophical one. I know you have your hands very full and a lot on your plate, and I know the statute is clear about what it requires in the reporting. I'm talking specifically about agenda item 4D, the cost avoidance report. I know the statute says that you have to report on certain things, but I'm wondering if a concern of mine has always been, and I've brought it up in this commission in the past, that although we may be saving costs on the state level through decreasing prison population, we've seen in other states that are ahead of us in criminal justice reform that they've seen an increase in cost to local jails because of diversion of population to local jails. They may have seen, in some cases, an increase in cost to the court system, where offenders who have been released or taken advantage of the benefits of AB 236 have subsequently reoffended and are now back in the court system again, or they're potentially being reincarcerated again, and it's actually costing more money than it would have if they would have been incarcerated the first time under the old statute. So I'm wondering if there is any discussion or intent about looking at and calculating those potential costs in addition to the cost avoidance the state may be benefiting from.
For the record, Victoria Gonzalez. Thank you. That would be absolutely, I think, something within the realm of discussion when this report is brought to the commission, because this is exactly, the report asks for these recommendations, and to me, that would include any concerns or, we could call this collateral, fiscal impact, or, other, I'm trying to think of another word, but collateral is the most, the word that comes to mind right now is to contextualize what you're talking about. Because I know this is a concern when I've met with other individuals as well in terms of just AB 236 generally, is concerns about what's happening at the local level. While there are these mandates for state agencies and departments, there obviously is an impact to the local level. And the Nevada Local Justice Reinvestment Coordinating Council, while one of the things it's tasked with is being able to administer grant funds, it's also tasked with assessing and addressing issues that are at that level, at the county level. And while we might not have that council up and running by the time this report is put together, that council represents that voice that needs to be considered when making these recommendations. And so obviously at the pleasure of this commission, whatever it is you would like to discuss when we get to that point, I think would be appropriate. And then whatever the commission decides, we could include all aspects of that in the report.
Chuck, Director Callaway, I wanted to supplement that point. As we all know, the effective date of AB 236 is July 1, and our first report is due on August 1. We're not going to be able to report much beyond establishing the baseline. But I think you make a great suggestion, and I think what we want to try to do, to the extent we can, is canvass sheriff's offices and others to get their input on how you might capture cost impacts at the local level, so we can include that in the framework that we're discussing. It's a good suggestion, and certainly an area that we need to take a look at. I think the courts are also important to consider, and there may be consequences associated with a reduction in state costs that are assumed or picked up at the court level or jail level or other levels. So I think this is an issue we need to pursue, and we'll need to work this into the framework. I don't see how, practically speaking, we can get all of this framework in place in the July meeting for the report on August 1st, but to the extent that we are still working on, I'll call it the collateral consequence impact, I think we want to at least make the point that that has to be part of the calculus and has to be the ongoing work of the commission. But obviously, Chuck, if you or others have ideas about how to develop that framework at the local level, I think we ought to explore that and get that on the table so that we can at least set that in motion. But good point. Did you want to add anything, Director, to your comments or your question, or based on the responses from the Director or me?
No, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the response, and thank you, Director.
Are there any other questions for Director Gonzalez on the data portion of her report?
Well, I had a question or a comment based on the last comment.
Could you announce your name when you're, all
Yes.
commissioners, please announce your name when you're going to speak so
Sorry.
the public knows
Sorry,
who's speaking.
Chairman.
Thank you. So,
Christine Jones-Brady. One of the things that we may be able to do to reduce the costs and the burden on the local jails would be to explore more transitional housing and inpatient treatment, as well as mental health treatment, identify places for people to be able to live and stay and get the treatment and the services they need while their cases are pending, or while they're, waiting for different, while they're in a different, various stages of their proceedings. And so I don't know if the director has some ideas about how to work towards that. I'd like to hear about it, because I think that will go a long way to alleviating the other problems with the overcrowdings of the jails and the increased and the recidivism.
For the record, Victoria Gonzalez. Thank you, Ms. Brady. Yeah, I think I have to say that is an area that we need more ideas and resources, and I think that is absolutely within the realm of our discussions. I was thinking about that as I was looking at this section and preparing for today, and thinking about how it recommends here the Housing Division of the Department of Business and Industry to create transitional housing. But I think that isn't the catch-all to address this concern. And I have to say that I'm looking forward to our discussion as it goes on today, because I think as we're talking about potential options to, I think that issue will come up again later as we discuss options to respond to the existing crisis and what's on the agenda today. But I agree that's an area we need more help or we need more information, and I would be happy to focus some of our resources as well as we're trying to gather all the information we need to include in this report, and I will put that on my list and take any recommendations from the commission as well, and I will go and explore and we can discuss that as well. And I thank you for reminding me of that.
Justice Hardesty, this is Emily Salisbury for the record. I'd like to offer up just my, again, expertise on this knowledge and this topic around correctional treatment and rehabilitation, around evidence-based corrections, and the fact that we can no longer have conversations about public safety in this state without talking about treatment and rehabilitation, given the evidence behind it and the effectiveness. So I'd be happy to help in whatever ways that I can as part of the commission and elsewhere.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for the director on the data portion of her report?
Justice Hardesty, this is John Arascata. I guess it's more a comment wrapped in a question, is that I think the discussion that began with Chairman Callaway, then Ms. Jones-Brady, really signifies how important the calculus is going to be in what this commission is going to do, and that although numbers don't lie, an emphasis in a misplaced emphasis can come out with the wrong numbers. And I think we need to be, as a commission, very sensitive to what the variables are and what is factored into our calculus, because the results will come out very differently depending on where the thumb's placed.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this stage? All right. We have been going 2 hours and 20 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes. I'd like to take up one more agenda item before we take our break. If we have to, we'll interrupt the agenda item, but I'd like to try to get through the next agenda item if there are no other questions for the director at this point. Okay. As you'll recall, at our February meeting, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the subawards available through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And as you know, we approved an application process for agencies to apply for the $350,000 that was made available from the Bureau of Justice Assistance to the state of Nevada for support to implement AB 236. For the benefit of the public, the Commission had developed a process in which we reached out to various stakeholders and invited submissions of access to the grant money, and we have received responses with respect to those. Today we're going to review the applications that we received, and I'd like to hear about each request, an overview. We've provided copies to the Commission, and of course the materials regarding those requests were part of the materials that are on our website and were part of this agenda. So I'll ask Victoria and Ms. Barbara Pierce from CJI to provide an overview of the subaward program and updates on this funding. As you may also recall, Commission members, we were given until September 1st to expend or utilize the first $150,000 of this money. I think we have some news on that front as well, but I'll leave it to the director and to Ms. Pierce to share that news and that information with the Commission before we start getting into the individual subawards. Director?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, we've invited representatives for each of the requests to be available for any questions the Commission may have. I haven't had a chance to check, and so I just wanted to take a quick roll call to see. I can see that Sergeant Rosales is here. And then is Deputy Director Williams or Chris Franklin here?
Yes, we're here. Brian Williams for the record. Chris Franklin is also here for the
Thank you. Director Sherlock, are you here?
Yes, Mike Sherlock for the record is here.
And then Ms. Freilich or Ms. Noble, are you here?
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is Jennifer Noble from the Washoe County DA's office. I am here. Lori Freilich, our law office manager, is also available to answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay, great. So we'll move through the agenda, and then as needed, thank you all for being here to help us be able to move this along. As Justice Hardesty said, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, provides an opportunity for states that have recently passed justice reinvestment legislation to apply for funds to support implementation of the policies. Any agency involved in implementing AB 236 is eligible to apply for subaward funding to help offset initial implementation costs and support sustainability. Subawards are discretionary grants from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA, for states. These funds from BJA are placed in CJI's budget, and then CJI administers the grants, which is why we're in this process right now, where the commission collected these requests, and then we're going through CJI, and then they'll move it along to BJA. These funds provide for development or delivery of training, technical assistance, performance measurement, key personnel, and evaluation of staff or services, and then other uses as related to the support for staff travel, purchases of equipment, development of technology, and anything else necessary to implement the policies. I am going to turn the time over to Barbara, and as we do that, I want to direct your attention to one of the first materials we included in your for the meeting, which is the chart of the requests we received up to date. And
it's under tab 5.
Oh yes, tab 5. Thank you. And we'll go into more detail about this as well, but this is for you to review, just a snapshot of the amount of funds that have been requested, how based on the request, if there was the statutory mandate in AB 236 based that would apply to that request, and then how that calculates with what's available. Go ahead, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Barbara Pierce from CJI for the record. I have 2 updates to share based on recent discussions with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Back in February at the meeting, I had indicated that there was $350,000 worth of subaward funding for the state of Nevada, and that was divided into 2 parts, $150,000 for spending through September 2020 and $200,000 available for spending October 2020 through September 2021. Because of the challenges states are facing in dealing with COVID-19, we recognize that that first pot of money by the end of September might be difficult. We discussed that with the Bureau of Justice Assistance and recently submitted an extension. We have every reason to believe the extension will be granted, and what that means is that both the $150,000 and the $200,000 will be available through September 2021. So hopefully you find that helpful. In terms of a second update, at the end of last month, we at CJI confirmed that we have $78,000 in subaward funding that will not be used by another state. Per the commitment we made at the last meeting, the February meeting, after Judge Freeman's impassioned request, we requested that BJA allow us to shift these dollars over to Nevada. We received confirmation from BJA that those funds can be reallocated, and so that brings the Nevada total to $428,000. The reason that we're able to do that is that unlike in other states, your agencies identified appropriate uses of the funds very early on, and so you've proven that you can actually utilize the funds. Justice Hardesty, I might tap into your memory here, but just for clarification, you do not necessarily need to decide on the $78,000 today. A separate application can be submitted to BJA at a later date for those funds. Justice Hardesty, you had indicated that you might be interested in receiving recommendations today for the $350,000 so we can get an initial application completed and submitted to BJA. And then the agencies could be asked to submit requests for the 78,000. Justice Hardesty, is that still the plan?
Well, I'd like to put all of this before the commission, but I wanted them to have the full knowledge of the updates of what's available or potentially available to the commission when they're thinking about these subaward requests. And it is possible, and I am not sure, but it is possible that agencies might need more time, those who didn't submit applications, to submit an application. So that's something that we may want to take into account. And the commission may ask questions of agencies who did submit, if those can be modified or pared down depending upon certain issues that arise as a result of the requests that were made. So I think this is all part of the vetting process the commission needs to go through. Commission, I am hopeful that we take action with respect to the requests we have received today, whether it's in full or in part, so we can get those before CJI and get those processed so that people can count on them, and we'll know relatively soon whether those awards have been are in the funding mix, so that people can count on that effort as we start to really work through the data requirements that these various agencies are trying to satisfy along with other demands. So that said, Ms. Pierce, if you'd like to proceed, or Director Gonzalez, whichever, on the 4 applications we've received.
Okay, so are there any questions for Ms. Pierce about the information she just provided about the update? We just want to make sure.
Yeah, this is Judge Freeman. I'd like to say thank you, Ms. Pierce. That is very impressive. And on behalf of the courts, I appreciate you stepping up to the plate like that. I'm very impressed. And my agenda has always been having more funds for substance abuse and mental health issues, which is the majority of the cases that I see on a daily basis. And you answered the call. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You can thank another state as well.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Pierce. And I wanted to express like how grateful we are to have CGI and their staff. Obviously, we have a lot on our plate, not only with the mandates of AB 236, and the things that not only this commission is trying to understand, but then trying to implement based on the AB 236 mandates. And I really appreciate not having to also learn how to handle grants along with everything else we're trying to. And so I'm going to refer to Barbara. I just decided as my grant ambassador, and I really appreciate this, that this is something that we can facilitate and then look to you and just ask, what do you need from us? So thank you. I will direct your attention to the materials again we provided, and I apologize to those representatives who we invited to attend from the agencies. I did not provide the entirety of these materials to you. If you have access to the internet, and if you go to sentencing.nv.gov, you'll be able to look at the meeting materials, and you'll be able to see not only your request that you submitted, but the requests of the other agencies that we will be reviewing. And we also, like I'd mentioned, we're also going to refer to the chart that was prepared to help be a visual comparison of those requests as we see what the total amounts are. So if you want, I apologize for not providing that to you sooner. What I'm going to do at this time is just summarize the requests. The representatives here are here to answer specific questions. I'm just going to give an overview of them. You have the requests in front of you. You also have the chart. As a highlight, I will note we received 4 applications for funding. We received a request from NDOC, Parole and Probation, Post, and the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. We asked CJI to do an initial review of the applications, like I said, our grant ambassador, to ensure that they are consistent with the BJA-defined applicable uses we laid out in February, and they are. You have a handout with these request totals on them. We've added up the total requests and provided that to you in relation to the $350,000. You will see the total amount of requested exceeds the $350,000 that was available at the time the applications were submitted. We also show the total request compared to the total with the $78,000 factored in. I appreciate the time it took for these agencies to put together and submit these applications. There was a concern that this money was going to go unused, as we can see happened in another state, and was not able to be used. And I appreciate you taking the time and then taking advantage of these resources to help in the implementation of AB 236. We wanted to show you this chart before we present the details of the application. Chair Hardesty asked that we separate state and local requests and indicate the related statutes requiring agencies to perform new functions. This information is on that same handout. So you can see where we pointed out the statutory requirements that are specific to the requests, or if the request was associated with just generally a need for support to implement AB 236. I will now provide a brief overview of each subaward request, and then, as I mentioned, we have the representatives available here to answer any questions you may have. I'll begin with the request from NDOC. NDOC submitted 2 requests that represent different options for the same purpose. So these look very similar because they are. One is to take a contractor approach or to hire an FTE, but they serve the same purpose. NDOC has indicated they would prefer the full-time employee option. The 2 FTEs, it would create what the department is calling a quality assurance department to monitor and ensure compliance with justice reinvestment requirements. This is not just limited to data. While we've already talked about the immense data requirements that NDOC is going to be taking on with their already existing data requirements, in addition to what they're going to be providing to this commission and the department pursuant to AB 236. They have a myriad of requirements as well provided in AB 236, and these employees, this department would help monitor all of that. The second option, as I mentioned, covers the same type of staff and same roles, but by contract positions. You can see the details of what these, like I said, it's generally to help with implementation of AB 236. The data is obviously a huge component, but it's also going to be anything associated with employee training and anything else that they need to help support the implementation of AB 236. The request for the FTEs is $274,292. The request for the contractor is $266,493. And you can see the dates of when those will start and begin. Chair, would you like to take questions for each agency as I complete the summary, or would you like to wait till I'm done with all 4?
No, let's take them for each agency, and then if they wish to augment your characterization of the presentation, they're welcome to do that, and then we can entertain questions.
Great. So first of all, representatives from NDOC, Deputy Director Williams, and Mr. Franklin, would you like to add anything to what I summarized here for your application?
No, not at this time. We'll take whatever questions.
Great. So Victoria Gonzalez, for the record, I open up to the commission then if there are any questions for the, at the pleasure of the chair, of course, if there are any questions for the representatives from NDOC.
This is John McCormick. If the positions were to be, actual NDOC employees, what's the sustainability plan to keep those going beyond the end of grant funding?
We've also requested these positions in our up-and-coming budget, fill those as well. So we are proceeding with, if these get approved by the time they expire, hopefully we'll get them approved in our next budget cycle.
Okay, thanks.
Director Keith Logan for the record. Is there any, for the agency involved, is there any way to potentially cut anything from the request to reduce it for where we could fit in more with the amount of money that we have?
Yes, we also discussed that. Looking at the numbers, we calculated about an 8% over. We could definitely look at our budget to possibly have some savings as it relates to travel.
This is Chris Franklin for the record. Some of the options that we looked at, once we noted the overage, the $35,310.84, we looked at alternatives. We could postpone CO2 position year one and started in year two. That would reduce that savings about 32,619. Could also eliminate travel from year one for the quality assurance manager. That would save another $1,562. And then working with our IT department, if we were able to remove the informational services costs, that would be $5,342. So we're looking at possibly being able to reduce with those options about $34,660. Bring us almost in line. It would bring it down to about $642.84 over.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
This is Chair Hardesty. I wanted to follow up on that question. The way I understood the proposal is that it's intended to fund either contractors or positions for 2 years. Do I understand this correctly?
Chris Franklin, for the record, yes, it would be the partial year, the remaining part of this year through the end of the through September, because that was initially what the guidelines were, that we had to try and utilize funding, and then year two would be the following year.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Okay, so when we based our cost, we based it on a 4-month period instead of a year term for year one.
Right. So my question is, under year two calculations, and maybe you've addressed this and I just didn't follow it, that year two calculation is through June 30 of 2021, or is it through a period longer than that? Is it through September of 2021?
It's through September 31st of 2021.
Okay. So if the legislature were to approve your budget and fund these two positions, say commencing July 1, that would result in savings with respect to those year two salaries for each of those two positions, correct?
If that's the way the system worked, unfortunately, even during this last legislative session, our brand new positions, the most current ones that we could get, didn't go into effect until October 1. The legislature takes a look at when the actual funding for that would run out, grant funded position. So then they change the availability date of when you can hire to coincide with that. We had last session, we had 4 positions that moved grant funded in other areas. And the hire date for those legislature was set at October.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions from commission members? I would make a request, if you could, gentlemen, to supplement your request with the savings calculations that you explained in response to questions from the commission. But the total number, if it were employee funded, under those revisions would be what amount again?
Quite honestly, we looked at the contracted positions, just for the logistics of it. We're hiring those new positions in. And so for the quality assurance manager, combined year one and year two costs would be $144,401. Then for the program officer 2, the combined cost year 1 and 2 would be $116,750.
All right. And that also adjusts for the travel?
That adjusts for the travel, and as long as we can get our informational waived, then we should be.
Okay. So maybe you could take a moment, unless there are other questions from commission members, and recalculate that amended request so we can have that on the record in the meeting, the total.
You want that for the non-contracted?
Yes, sir, please. Excuse me, for the contracted total. Are there any other questions from commission members? All right, let's go on to the next subaward request.
For the record, Victoria Gonzalez. Next, I will summarize the request from the Division of Parole and Probation of the Department of Public Safety. They are requesting $75,142.84. This request includes $36,000 for a master trainer course on the Nevada Risk Assessment System, otherwise referred to as NRAS. This will create 4 master trainers and an additional 24 trainers for the division. The division had staff turnover, which included the loss of 5 NRAS trainers. A master trainer class would help ensure sustainability of this training within the division because those trainers can train new staff to be trained. Additionally, the request includes $39,142.84 for assessment tracking enhancements. The enhancements would allow parole and probation and NDOC to access assessments and track individuals through the system, would allow for printing of assessments, and bolster the assessment override feature and tracking. Sergeant, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Oh, we can't hear you. I can see you.
I think you have to unmute yourself.
No, yeah, you unmuted it. I don't know if your mic's working. No, we still can't hear you.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so yeah, this is Sergeant Rosales. Sorry, I had to switch my microphone audio. And
Okay,
no,
yes.
ma'am, I don't have anything to add, but I am available for any questions that you guys may have.
Okay, great.
Do any commission members have any questions for Sergeant Rosales?
This is Emily Salisbury for the record. Hi, Sergeant Rosales, good to see you. I just have a question about whether or not UCCI, the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute, made any provisions to deliver master training courses online to reduce the cost. Of course, we're all doing this work now as a result of the COVID crisis. So I just wonder if any discussion has been, if there's been any discussion with UCCI and whether or not UCCI is still sole source in terms of delivering the master training.
Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Rosales for Parole and Probation. Due to these requests being submitted before the COVID-19 kind of shut everything down, our initial cost assessment was based on the in-person training. So staff from UCCI coming to Nevada, training our staff, and completing that here on site in Las Vegas. Now with the state of the world, that is definitely something that we can reach out to see if that's a possibility. To reduce that cost of that $36,000. The $36,000 covered not just the training, but it was the travel and the supplies and books and all of those things combined into one solid cost.
Okay.
And then as to your second question, as far as the sole proprietor, yeah, we're still contracted with the University of Cincinnati for our NRAS validation piece. So we would just continue working with them to provide the master training class.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sergeant Rosales?
Chair Hardesty, it's Russ Marsh.
Hi, Mr. Marsh. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I had a question for Sergeant Rosales or possibly Director Carpenter if she's available. I saw on there that you had lost 125 positions and 5 trainers. Could you give us an idea of how that happened and what the period of time was that caused those losses?
Yes, sir. Sergeant Rosales for parole and probation. I've been tracking the training of NRAS since its inception back in January of 2018. So the time frame that we're looking at is from the beginning of our adoption of 2018 up until the present day. So that would be March, April of 2020. The 125 staff that we've lost have been not through there's been retirements, we've had promotions, we've had transfers to other agencies, we've had individuals leave for other state agencies. You know, they transfer to another police agency in another state. So the 125 kind of encompasses all of those different scenarios for loss of employees.
Okay, great. It sounds like just normal attrition and turnover. Thank you.
Any other questions for Sergeant Rosales?
Keith Logan for the record. Sergeant, I know you just had indicated that you haven't had the opportunity yet to speak with the University of Cincinnati to determine could they do it online versus in person. But is there any other monies that you could reduce from the grant request that would help us fulfill the overage that we're facing?
Sergeant Rosales from the Division of Parole and Probation. As far as on the technical aspect, the enhancements of the 39,142.84, that was quoted directly from our EATS, which is to actually upgrade our current tracking and enter our system for entering our assessment. So that was a high estimate from them, so that may be reduced slightly. But on the 36,000 for the training from UCCI, like I said, that included their travel and training costs. So just off the top, with them not traveling to Las Vegas, that should reduce that cost. But I don't want to say that for certain until I've actually gotten an estimate from UCCI.
Thank you very much. Just as soon as you can report it, I don't want just one single agency to take the full lump from trying to reduce everything. If we could spread it out a little bit.
Understood.
Any other questions from commission members of Sergeant Rosales at this time?
Yeah, Chair Hardesty, Todd Story with the ACLU. I'm curious about continuity. Once the staff is trained through this grant award, if it is awarded, what happens beyond the life of the grant to keep people trained and able to then retrain other staff?
Sergeant Rosales from Parole and Probation. Yeah, the master trainer position would allow the division to continue creating our own trainers. Right now, our trainer staff, so our individuals that are approved and have completed the trainer program in order to train our staff in NRAS, they cannot create other trainers. They can create staff that are trained in NRAS, but they can't create additional trainers. This program for master trainer would allow 4 individuals, and these would be statewide in the state of Nevada. It would allow these 4 individuals to create additional trainers within the division so they could continue to facilitate that training protocol.
So once the master trainer category is fulfilled, the rest of the training requirements then can be handled by those master trainers rather than having to continually bring in someone from outside in order to fulfill the program?
Sergeant Rosales, yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the commission? I just had one, Sergeant Rosales. In terms of priority, I'm assuming that the tracking enhancement has a more immediate, I'm sure they're both important from a priority standpoint, but a more immediate priority would be the tracking enhancement. Would that be correct?
Sergeant Rosales for the Division of Parole and Probation. I believe they both have equal weight at this state, just based on the number of staff we continue to lose that are trained in NRAS. The enhancements are looking more just for future. Some of the enhancements would be necessary right away, or definitely appreciated right away. But one of the enhancements is adding the ability for NDOC to view and to enter assessments into the same assessment module that we have. and then also using our assessments to build and auto-populate what our case plans are going to look like that are going to be individualized to each offender. So those are, as we're working to implement AB 236, we're working on what that template would look like and can provide that to EATS to get the ball rolling on that. But honestly, initially, our master trainer may be the most important just because we're losing staff so quickly that are trained.
So I'm trying to develop a pragmatic approach here.